Thanks for coming, everyone. My name's Godwin. I'm the creative producer here at Isla. Before we start tonight, I just want to acknowledge that we're meeting on the lands of the Kaurna people and pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Tonight, we've got Dave. Thanks so much to Dave. Thanks so much for everyone for coming through. It's a really great way, I think, to start the program this year. If you haven't been to a Lab Rats before, it's been sort of growing and bubbling away in 2024, but this year, 2025, it's going to be packed. So pretty much every Tuesday from now through till the end of the year, or at least till December, there's going to be something happening. So it won't always be workshop blocks. We've got some panel discussions. We've got artist talks, a couple of international artists coming through who are going to be talking about what they've been working on. At least one international artist. Hey, come on in. At least one international group that's going to be demoing some of their homemade electronic instruments. So that will be exciting and interesting. And more than a few faces here who I've been hassling to pull something together as well. So yeah, it'll be a mix of visual stuff, text stuff, sound and music, experimentation. It's really about that intersecting point. There'll be a few things along the way that are like a little bit career-y as well, like pathways in creative tech and art stuff. That may or may not be of interest, but if it is, come check it out. I said I'd give a little intro for Dave. Dave Court, probably lots of people here already know, and you'll probably just be listening saying, I wonder if he says what I know about Dave. So I just know Dave as an incredible multidisciplinary artist who's has a hand in so many different things across the city, from painting giant murals to working on wacky projects, and the time at the studio and all sorts of projects. So I've enjoyed greatly getting to know Dave, and this place has been a good excuse to further that. So I think that's about all I've got to say. Oh, water. There's some water at the side if you need a drink. Bathrooms are just around behind the curtains. These events are paid for in part by Lumo Energy, so I got to thank them at least for a couple more months. And that's it. Yeah, thanks. Oh, and Sash. Sash is our tech tonight. Legend. Thanks, Sash. And cheers. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Lewis. Hello, everyone. That's on. Welcome. Thanks for coming. I do know most people, but yes, hello, I'm Dave, to those that I don't know. I think maybe for starters, can we do a bit of a show of hands? Who is an artist in the room? Anyone a musician? Yeah, cool. Anyone, has anyone used Touchdesigner before? Oh, Helen, you're way ahead of everyone. And who's never opened Touchdesigner before? Cool. And who has never made art on a computer before? All right, cool. So we're starting from the very, very beginning. Let's go. So I'll go, I've got here just like a bit of a vague overview of this is maybe as much as we're going to try and tackle today, just as a quick snapshot of where we might end up, and then I'll go back to the start. So we'll start from what you guys are looking at. I'll go very slow, and feel free to ask any questions as we go along if I say anything that doesn't make sense or goes too fast, or you miss anything. Yeah, Oki? It might, did anyone get asked to install a key? Yeah, so you just need to make an account and just set a username and password. Has everyone else done that? Has everyone got Touchdesigner open? Cool. So is anyone not looking at what we're looking at here? So this should be what everyone is looking at. This is the opening default scene that you start with. So this is the basic building blocks of Touchdesigner is what we're looking at here, and they're called operators. So each of these is an operator, and there are different families of operators, and within each of the families of operators, there are a heap of different types of operators that do different things. So we can start by, I'm going to close this. We don't need that. Just give us some extra screen space. We can delete this. And we'll start from blank, blank. So this is our, you can, click and drag to move around and kind of navigate in the viewport so we can see what we're doing, and then scroll, scrolling zooms in and out. So if you want to look at anything closer or if you want to get a bigger picture. And then if you ever get lost, a quick, easy one is H. If you click H for home, and it takes you back to put everything in your view. So just kind of easy navigation stuff. So if we start from blank, the basic building blocks, operators, and if you can either hit tab or double click, and that brings up these are the operator families. So this is everything that we'll use to build anything in Touchdesigner. So we've got chops, tops, and sops is what we're going to deal with mainly for this course. So we'll start off. The way that it works is basically functions in 1 dimension, 2 dimension, 3 dimensions is kind of a simple way to think about it. So we've got chops, which handle numbers, tops handle images, and then sops will handle 3-dimensional objects. So chops being channel operators, we'll start with that first. And I'll this is kind of a bit of ask me questions and I'll explain it, and then a little bit of it, sometimes it will be just follow along and then it will make sense later. So if everyone can click create a constant chop. And a thing that is useful if you're searching, if you have the operator create dialog up, you can type in. So if I just type in CO, it narrows down and it helps me find the constant easier. And then you just click and click to create. And then what we're looking at here is our operator. So something that all operators in Touchdesigner will have in common is this kind of layout. So you have inputs on the left-hand side of the box and then outputs on the right-hand side. And anyone who's done kind of node-based programming in other software will be familiar with this, but if you have never done that before, it can maybe be difficult to get your head around at the start. But yeah, we've got input, output, and that will be the main tool for connecting and building networks in Touch. This is a viewer, turns off and on what the information is that we're looking at. So each of the operators contains or transforms information that passes through it, and that just kind of turns off and on what you're looking at. And the other one that we might use is making it active. So we can interact with the information inside the operator is this little plus down here. So if I say you make a viewer active, that's pressing that off and on. And the other stuff we can do with later. So this is a basic building block of operating with of playing with numbers in Touch. So this operator, whenever you click on an operator, it will come up with your control panel up here, and this will give you an idea of what the operator is for and what it can do. And you can, sometimes you know what you're going to do, sometimes you can make something and then just have a look at it and play and figure it out. So this, what the constant does is it just creates a number. So this, we've got a number between 0 and 1, or you can type in a number here, and then this will hold the number 5 right now, basically. And to see what this can do, I'm going to make a speed chop. And then, so you've got a speed chop, and this is telling me there's something wrong. And speed chop needs an input to do what it's trying to do. So we can look at what the inputs are: source, reset. We don't need a reset, but we need a source. And the constant here is going to be our source information. So if I drag this, left click on the output from the constant, and you can drag, and this is going to create a wire. And so you want to go from that output to this input. And then that's going to basically set the speed doing its thing. Does that make sense? Is everyone with me? I'm seeing confused faces. So I just said up here, number 5. And you can kind of, yeah, Caitlin? Is it definitely a constant chop? Is it green? Cool. Cool. And so what this is doing is the speed is basically an increasing number. So this is really useful for creating movement and animation or driving things to do things later on. Yeah, and basically what it does is it increases at a rate of the input number. So if the input number is 1, the speed should be increasing at 1 unit per second. So you can play around with this and kind of see what output that will make. Or we can just leave that for now. And the next thing that I'm going to do that is, won't make sense till later, but I'm going to put a null on the end of this little network. So a null is something that is common across all the different operator types. And basically a null means it doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything to the information. It just holds the information that is going into its input, and then we can do things with that later on. So yeah, it'll make sense why that is useful a bit later. The next thing that I'm going to do, just to show you guys some kind of like different types of movement and number changing that we can do within chops, is I'm going to make an LFO, which music people might be familiar with what LFOs are and can do. But it's, basically a sine wave. It's like a sine wave that, bounces back and forth. And you can play around with different types of waves in here. Like a lot of this stuff is going to be, to get cool things, is like just fiddling around with stuff and seeing what kind of fun outputs happen. But I'm going to do an LFO. So that's, at the moment, if you can look at it, we see that it's bouncing back and forth between -1 and 1. And I'm going to put a math on this next. And we can see what the math does is if it takes an input from anything that's going into its input slot, and then it can alter the information that's coming in to a different mathematical range. So we can see, a little bit of this is like knowing what it's doing, or you can kind of eyeball it and figure it out. So I can look at this and say, my information going in is moving from -1 to 1. And if you can see, that just changed the data, and it's now moving from 0 to 1. Or I can say I want this to be from 0 to 5. Or I can say I want it to be from 0 to 360, which, has varied applications in the future. And I'm just going to put a null on the end of that network as well. And one more thing to give us a feel for what chops are, and then we can make some pretty pictures. I'm going to make a noise. Is everyone still with me? Is this making sense? Confused grins? Yeah? Good. So noise is something that, is kind of a pretty powerful building block within the program, and is across all operators as well, which is basically, it generates a set of random values, which, depending on how you use it, can do heaps of different stuff. So you can see this has created a wave. This is like a set of numbers. We can see here on our x-axis, it's giving me 1 to 601. So this is 600 individual values contained in this chop, and they're bouncing from about, I don't know, what's that, negative 0.6 up to about 0.8, something like that. And the way that I can visualize that in the same way that these ones are going is I can drop on a time slice chop, which is doing something, outputting values similar to what an LFO is doing up here, but it's, not as predictable. So can be useful for creating different types of animation or different types of movement, depending on what kind of thing you're trying to create. Any questions? All right. So chops, one-dimensional data. So it's numbers that move, numbers that change in different ways. And now if we switch over to tops, this is going to be two-dimensional data. So it's images. So it will be pixel-based images. If people have used Photoshop or Illustrator, Touchdesigner works in pixel land like Photoshop, not so much vectors or that kind of thing. First top we're going to look at is a ramp. Now this comes in as a gradient, and we can click and play. I think even just the ramp by itself is pretty powerful for creating various effects depending on how you want to play with it. And if you just have a fiddle around with the different options we have here, you can kind of see we can do different types of ramps. Adjusting the phase will move where it is, and which this is something that can be animated later. And then kind of period, you can turn it into stripes or circles or whatever. And then what I'm going to do after this is a transform. And you can see on the transform, this is set to be, basically a transform. If people have used Photoshop, this is similar to a Command T, and you can scale, warp, distort, rotate your image however you like. And something that I'm going to do here is we're going to reference one of our chops. So the ways that different operators can talk to each other in Touchdesigner is through wires, wire links or referencing, and through wires, chops have to talk to chops in the same family. So tops can be wired and linked and connected to other tops, but you can't link a top to a chop. It just won't do it. So the way that you can get information from chops into tops, or talking between families of operators, is by referencing. And to do that, I'm going to get this one up here. So if we go up to our first speed null that we were playing with, I'm going to hit the cross to make it active, and then select the transform. And I'm going to drag this null. So just left click, drag, and I'm going to say I want this data to be referenced in this parameter. So yeah, just drag that over onto the rotate and hit chop reference. And now we can see that's moving like really moving, but it's moving really slowly. So what we can do is bump up the input speed, which will make the speed move faster, and it will make the transform rotate faster. And something that I'm going to do here as well is I'm just put a limit on the speed. And I'm going to make that 360 because we don't, if we're sending something in a circle, we don't need it to be rotating for more than 360 degrees. And if you get into crazy big numbers, it can kind of confuse things sometimes. Yeah, so speed, limit type, loop, and then set the maximum to 360. And you should be able to see here it will hit 360 and then it will just bounce back to 0. So if you make your null here active, so see how this is what it will normally look like, and then active, the border goes away, and then you say, what I want to put this information to is in the transform, and then just click and drag this data over to this parameter. And chop reference. Has everyone got that? And then a few other things I'm going to fiddle with in here just to make this look a bit better. If we go into the tile tab on the transform, you can see there's different types of extensions. So we can make it like repeat, mirror. I might just put it on hold for this. And then we can play around with the colors. So you can, you can see what I'm doing. You can kind of add more colors by clicking on the ramp gradient here, and you can remove colors by just dragging it off. And then just drag and adjust these to get the kind of effect that is nice. And I'm going to put a null on the end of this as well, just because it's a good habit to be in. Let's have a look at the top noise and see what that can turn into. So if we come in here, something that I'm going to set in here, if you go into common, you can set the resolution. So everyone should be on your like non-commercial license that you're using. You should have, the only limitation that you have is the resolution of the output that you have. So you can kind of operate within 1280, 720 is a good kind of like screen output and still look nice enough to get an idea and play around. And then, maybe I'll just fiddle with these parameters to make it see where it's something that kind of looks nice. So it's, this stuff doesn't really matter. A bit of personal preference. And then something else that we can look at in here in the noise, we've got transform. So another useful basic tool for Touchdesigner is if you've got values like this that you want to change, you can just left click in and hold, and then these values will come up, and if you kind of hover over it and drag side to side, it will let you change the numbers, which is useful for if you, so you can like type in values to these to change them, or if you want to kind of just scrub through and like find something that looks nice, it can be, it's very useful to do this kind of scrubbing to find the value. Yeah, so click and hold and then drag left and right. And so if I want to go like 1, that will move a lot more each, like it'll move a lot faster than if I'm moving by 0.1 units or 0.01 units. It's a kind of a more fine tuning. So, and each of these, when you see values like this, it's usually X, Y, and Z parameters that we're adjusting. So X is generally left and right, Y is generally up and down, and then Z is backwards and forwards in 3-dimensional space, which if we're moving through this kind of like randomly generated noise, you can imagine it as a cube of this kind of thing where it's blobs of black and blobs of white, and if you're moving forwards through the fog is kind of how I think about it, and then that is what this Z transform is doing, which is how you get that kind of fun lava lampy effects. So what I'm going to do is put the LFO parameter onto this Z transform. So I'm going to make this one active, select the noise, and then drag this value over to this Z translate. And that's moving way too fast to be cool. So I'm going to put this down a lot and see if that changes it. Still moving pretty fast. And I'm going to change the frequency of the LFO to say like 0.5. Maybe even slower, let's make it 0.2. Maybe we want to move further. And something that can be useful if you're like building a scene or trying to build something visual is I'm going to put a null on the end of this network and leave it over here. And this, if you look at your top, there's like a little blue dot down here, which does that. So you can, basically see what you're working on while you're working on it. And then so if we've got this sound network that we're working within, and then we can add stuff in here and adjust it and kind of see the adjustments that we're making on the end of the line as we go. So next thing that I'm going to put in here is a lookup. And I'm going to make another ramp here. And I'm going to connect this ramp to the lookup in the other input there. And what the lookup does is it basically switches out pixel for pixel from black to white with whatever the input is. So if we say, because nothing has changed when we linked up that just then, but if we change this this end of the ramp to a different color, that's going to change that. And then if we say this white is corresponding to the white that's in the noise, and if we change that on the other end of the ramp, what's going on there? It'll change it to that. And then if we, does that make sense? Yeah. So what I've done is we've got noise going into a null over here, and we've got that flagged as a viewer. So we're looking at it in the background of our project, so I don't need to be like going and looking at this window to see what the final outcome is that we're making. And then I'm going to right-click on the output of the noise to say I want to insert a top in between this chain. And I'm going to make it a lookup top. And so this is saying I've got an error here. Second input required. So that tells me that the lookup is a top that needs to have 2 inputs to do what it's designed to do. And I'm going to make that second input a ramp. And make a ramp, drag the output of the ramp to the second input of the lookup. And then that hasn't changed anything, but when we go in and change the colors on the ramp, it will change the colors in the lookup. We cool. Yeah. So I sent it to the Z, the third parameter on the translate option. But again, you can play around with like sending it to any kind of chop reference. So if I send this number that's going up, that's too fast. I just turned that off. But if we want to make a different speed, I'll just, so what I'm going to do here, so this little network is powering this rotation, and I want to have a constant speed and null network that I can use to drive some more animation in our noise here. So I'm going to right click and drag, select all 3 of these chops, Command C, Command V. So I've got another one of these, and I can change and adjust this without affecting the rotation here. So yeah, so if I drag this on here, I can say, well, that's going way too fast. 60 is too fast for this speed, and turn that down. And say maybe that's still a bit too fast. And if I just turn this one off so we can see just what this one is doing, so we can see that's this, this number just slowly going up is driving this animation on the y-axis. So that, basically says keep going up and up and up and up until you hit the limit. And it will keep going until it hits the limit that I've set here. So I can make that bigger. Or I can make it zigzag, and it will go up until it hits a number, and then it will bounce back down. But yeah, it can be whatever you want it to do. Is everyone still with me? All right, where do we get lost?
At the beginning.
Are we missing the, have you got it spinning? All right, let's do that again. So, are we here? So we've got a transform that isn't moving. Checkered grid. Like that? So yeah, make sure we've got a ramp going into the input of the transform. And then if I want to drive the rotation on this transform, or you can drive any parameter, but let's say we want to drive the rotation. So I'll make sure my viewer up here that has, I want to use this number that's going from 0 to 360. I want to use this, I want that number to be this number. So I want to drive this animation using this value here that I've created, using the constant and the speed. So to do that, I'll say this speed is creating it, but it's living, it's just, yeah, hanging out in this null here. So I hit cross, make it active, and then that means I can interact with this number like that. And I say, come back to the transform, select that, and that will give me the control panel for this transform in the top right here. And kind of navigate back up to the null, drag that onto the number that I want it to be, basically, and say reference. And then it will sit in there. Make sense? Is anyone lagging? Is anyone need further help? Yeah? Did you drag it from the LFO, the little LFO network? So that sounds like you've dragged it from the LFO network. So that will be like this one is going, because it's a value going up and down. If we were to put that on here, it would move like that. Ooh. So to change how fast your speed goes, you alter the input constant. Yeah, so the speed is driven by whatever the value of the input is that it's receiving. Well, if it's on 0, it's not moving at all. But for the one that I was using to do the rotation, I had it set to 60. And then when I created another network here to do the up and down movement, I set it really low so it would move slow. So that was 0.5. Any other questions? Is anyone else lost? Do we want to wait a bit? All right, I should have said this at the start. I'm thinking about the way that these sessions are going to work overall and in general. I'm thinking we'll do basically an hour of this, where we just run through, create a network. I show some simple tools and techniques that can be used within the program. And then for the next hour, we can basically play with the tools, and that can be everyone catching up, learn from your neighbour, talk to your neighbour, figure things out together, or I'll come around and help people individually on things, and that can be on things that we've learned, or maybe things if you're kind of caught up on that and if you want to learn future stuff or you're doing more experimentation on your own, I can help you out with that. So yeah, if we just kind of charge through this, I think, yeah, we're doing pretty well for time. I've just got one more little network that I was planning to show. Yeah, so plenty of time for questions if anyone else is fully stuck and would like some assistance.
On the noise, sorry, the noise.
Yeah.
How would I quickly reset it back to the base?
So, a little trick, this little thing up here. Sorry. Up here in the very top right of a parameter, if you on the control panel, if you hit that, it will show you anything that you've adjusted. So that will show you anything that you've changed. And what you can do is if you go right click, reset parameter, right click, reset parameter, right click, reset parameter. And then if you click that, it will give you all the other parameters again. So to go through what I did with the noise again, how I made the noise animate, was if you go select the noise, there's a transform tab inside of the noise top. And I'm going to put a slow moving speed on the X, Y, Z, only on the Z translate parameter. So drag that, chop reference, and it will kind of slowly move. So at this point we should have something like this going on. All right. Last little one, we'll start a fresh thing. So for this next one, I'm going to show you how to do a little simple interactive animator using your mouse. So in the chops, there's something called a mouse in, which, yeah, the cool thing about Touchdesigner as well is that you can use basically anything as an input to create this kind of chop data. And just something that's default in the program is using the mouse. So what this is giving us is an X and a Y location of the mouse on the screen. So you can see that's going from, yeah, -1 to 1 as I go on the X axis of my screen. And then if I go up and down, the Y value will change. And I don't know why, but that moves from 0.56 to -0.56. And if we want to use this data to control something, let's make a circle, and then that's what we're going to be moving with it, a circle top. And to make this look nice for an output at the end, I'm going to make the circle 1280 by 720. Actually, I'll make it 1080, but you can make it 1280 by 720. And then I'm going to make the circle smaller by, if you want to change both of these parameters, both of these numbers at the same time, like how we do the click and hold to change, you can click and hold on this name here, and then it will change both the X and Y values at the same time, because otherwise, yeah, if you fiddle around with it, you can see this is the X sideways number of our radius of the circle. And then if we change this, it will change the Y value of our circle radius. But if I want both of them to be, let's say, 0.07, 0.07, 0.07. And then what value do we want to change on this circle? I think we want to use, it would be cool to use the mouse to change the location of this circle on the screen. So that would be the center. The center value is telling the circle where is the center of the circle. So you can adjust these to see that the circle in its screen here goes from 0.5 to negative 0.5. And what I'm going to do to make this easier to see is I'm going to put a null at the end of the network and then put that on the viewer. So if we put that back to 0, and then we can see the y value, if we change that, that as well goes from negative 0.5 to 0.5. So what we want to do is take this data that's coming in from the mouse and transform it and change it so that it can be used to correspond to the location data of this circle. So what I'm going to do is a select chop, and because we've got two channels in this operator here, the select allows us to just choose one of them. So I'm going to choose channel TX from the drop down here, and then I'm going to make another select for the TY. I'm going to make that and then drag the Y to connect them, and then select channel name TY. So now we've got our X data and our Y data as separate. And then we can put a math on these because the math is a very powerful tool for changing numbers. So math, I want to change the range because we want our circle to move from between negative 0.5 and 0.5. At the moment, the data is negative 1 to 1. So I can say we're going to go from negative 1 to 1 to negative 0.5 to 0.5. And you can see in the math here that that changes that X value. And I'm going to do the same on the Y. But I'm going to go from 0.56, from negative 0.56 to 0.56. And I'm going to make that negative 0.5 to 5. Oops. So what you do is what the select does is it chooses which outputs it wants to hold. So if you click on your select, it should be channel names here. Yeah, so by default, star is like everything. So you just select each one on each select. And then I'm going to put a null on the end of each of these. And then the values that we want to change live inside the circle top. So again, we want to change the center value. I'm going to make the X and the Y nulls active. And then we want our X center value to be equal to the mouse X value. And we can see that's moving. And then with the Y, I'm going to make the Y value the mouse Y value. Pretty fun.
What's the range again in the math of the both of them?
So it should be, different computers may be different. I think it's something to do with your screen resolution, but I'm looking at the X and the Y here, and I go, if my mouse is all the way on the left, X is negative 1. If my mouse is all the way on the right, it's positive 1. And I want to turn that into negative 0.5 to 0.5. And then same with the Y. I look at the Y and I go, right at the top, my mouse is giving 0.56. And then down the bottom of my screen, it's giving negative 0.56. So in the y, I'll change it from this to this. Yeah? Is everyone's math working? Do we love maths, guys? Yeah. All right, let's make some colors. So I'm going to make my circle blue. So if you go into circle, fill color. Maybe that blue. Yeah. So what I've done, the circle, the center values. So the center here tells the circle where in the screen the center of the circle should be. Yeah, yeah. So the math nulls, if you make them active, you can drag, I'll just do it again here if you want to watch. So if we've got the center value is 0, 0, but we've got our math nulls functioning here, we can make sure the circle is selected. We want to say we want our center values to change. So we'll just click drag X onto the X reference, Y goes onto the Y reference. Yeah. Yeah. All right, something else we're going to put in here. So now we've got, from this circle to this null at the end, which is what's displayed in the background, we can make some stuff in between. I've got a feedback top in the middle, and I'm going to make a comp after this as well. A composite. And a composite, what a composite does is it stacks inputs on top of each other like layers, kind of like Photoshop layers. So you can just put as many inputs into a comp as you like, and then it treats it like Photoshop layers as well. So the default operation is multiply. I'm going to change that to be over so we can see what's going on both of the things. And this can be a bit tricky, but it's pretty powerful when you get your head around it. I'm going to drag the comp, take the whole... Does everyone have a comp and a feedback? I might turn this off so you can see where my wires are going. Is that better? So my circle is connected to, it was connected to the null, and then I'm put a feedback in the middle. So right click on the output of the circle, that is going to the null, and if I put a top in here, it will see how it kind of inserts itself in the middle of the wire, so it stays in the same network. And then on the end of this feedback, I'm going to create a composite. So if you click the cross at the bottom of them again, it should make them not active. Oh, press the letter A. What is going on there? What if you Command Z? No, I don't think that will change your viewers. Let me have a look real quick. So if we got, yeah, circle into feedback, into a composite, into a null. You got it?
I think so. I had, for some reason, had viewers always active.
That sounds like not what you want. Yeah. So we want to make the null active to be able to see it. Yeah, that sounds fine for now. So the feedback will kind of just holds information and gets updated by the target top that lives in there. So what you can do is if we drag the composite, if you grab your comp, actually I'm going to connect the circle to the comp as well first. So you should have a comp and a feedback, should have a circle and a feedback going into your composite, and set the composite to over operation. Yeah, so make sure your composite operation here is set to over. Yeah, because by default it's set to multiplier. Yeah. And then what we're going to do to activate this feedback is grab the comp and drag it onto the feedback. And then, yeah. So basically what the feedback is doing is it's constantly updating with what the comp is sending back to it. And to make this so that it doesn't get just filled up is we're going to put a level in here. To activate the feedback. So what I did was just right click, after the feedback. So right click on the output of the feedback and add in a level. And I'm going to change, in this level, I'm going to go to post and change the opacity to be 0.9. So you can I'll see if you turn this, this is basically, we've just created a feedback loop of imagery. So it's like this feedback, there's data coming from the circle into the feedback, it's being affected by the level, it's going to the comp, and then the comp sends it back to the feedback. So it's like a little cycle that goes on here, which can create these fun trailing effects, and depending on the adjustments and the changes and whatever different effects you put in between the feedback and the composite, you can create a lot of different looks and effects. Something else fun that I'm going to put in here is an HSV adjust. And I'm going to make a hue offset by 5. I'm going to make this active again. Maybe more. And what I'm going to do as well is after this comp, I'm going to just make a transform. And this is not really doing anything. It's just going to put it on a black background to make it easier to see. Comp over background color on. And yeah, like everything, all of these you can just play around with the different values to see what different effects they give. So if I turn up the opacity, it will stick around for longer in the feedback loop because it's being made less, it's not as transparent each time that it goes through the feedback loop. Or if I turn down the opacity, it will make it more transparent each time it goes through the feedback loop. So background black is in this transform. So after the comp, right click, insert a transform. And then background color. I'm just going to change this. If you have colors, colors in Touchdesigner are always RGB and alpha. So this is, yeah, it doesn't really matter, but if you know colors, RGB, alpha, I'm going to change the alpha from 0 to 1. So this is telling me the background color is black. I'm going to say comp over background color on. So have you got, if you click on your feedback, does it say anything in target top here?
Comp 1.
Yeah. And what does your comp say? Does your comp look like mine of saying it's operation over?
It does. Yeah.
Have you got your circle connecting to the comp as well?
Maybe not.
What's the other thing that you fed the level into?
So the level I put it into, it's called an HSV adjust. All right, and I think that brings us to the end of our hour of intensive and confusing follow along. Does anyone have any questions that they want to share with everyone, or should we go deep and I'll come around? You can link it with the other one if you want to. Yeah, this is totally, this at the moment, this is functioning on its own. Yeah. Any way you like. What if we can make the circle change size? Let's get this LFO. And that's way too big, so I'll make it like 0.4 to 0.7. No, 0.04 to 0.07. And now that's changing size based on the LFO network that we made.
The scale of the circle.
Or you could do something like, if I want this to be not driven by my mouse movement, I could say, let's change only the X value to be driven by this LFO. And I want it to go from negative 0.5 to 0.5. And that's too fast, so I'll turn down the frequency. And now it's going left and right, controlled by this LFO here, and it's going up and down, controlled by my mouse still. So yeah, but like any of these parameters, you can drive by any of the other data that we've generated. Feedback. So feedback, I've got the level 0.94 opacity, and that's the only thing I've changed. Yeah. Have you got your level in there?